Chapter 18. Sam hung out in her dad's office until the first bell rang, not the least bit interested in joining her usual morning crowd in the cafeteria. However, the 5-minute passing period that usually afforded her plenty of time to navigate the Mansfield High School hallways did not take into account stitches and stairs. By the time she reached math class, she was sweating and panting and had no idea how tardy she was. Miss Baker gave her the evil eye stare down, and she tried to quietly slip in the door. "Miss Flynn!" Miss Baker's voice boomed, as cold and condescending as usual. "It's nice of you to join us this morning. I'm sure most of us weren't expecting to see you here today." Man, Sam hated this woman. Sam had begged her dad to change her schedule so she could avoid the dragon lady of the math department, but he wouldn't even consider it. "She's the best math teacher at the high school," he replied, which meant conversation over. Sam smiled weakly and turned to hobble as quickly as she could to her seat. Surely she wouldn't make Sam trudge all the way back to the attendance office to get a tardy slip. Of course she would, because that's how Miss Baker worked. As Sam tried her best to shrink into obscurity and avoid all the judgmental stares penetrating her like arrows, the classroom door slammed and Miss Baker jumped, startled. "Dustin Drake! When you do decide to show up to my class, you come in late and completely disturb this room." She was really working herself into a frenzy this morning. Her eyes bulged and made her look like one of those pug dogs with a squished face. She was so agitated she kind of panted, too. She really did look like one of those dogs, but that really insulted pugs. "Go to the office and get a tardy slip, young man!" Dustin simply stared at Miss Baker, shrugged his shoulders, and walked out the door, letting it slam extra hard on his way out. Thanks to Dustin Drake, Sam was able to slink into her seat and scrunch down enough to go off the radar of Miss Baker. Class proceeded at its normal boring pace. Sam's leg really began to throb as it dangled from her desk. She tried propping it up in front of her on Stacy Snyder's desk, but the chairs were too close together for Sam to get any relief. By the time the bell rang, she didn't care if anyone stared at her as she hobbled to English. Mrs. Walker would notice if Sam were tardy, but wouldn't make a big deal about it, so Sam didn't break her neck to get to class. She should have asked Miss Baker if she could leave a little early so she could make it on time, but what would be the point? The evil bat would say no, and it opened Sam up to more of her put-downs. Sam saw Steve coming down the hall toward her, so she ducked in the bathroom before he could get to her. She was not ready for his "how stupid are you" lecture. When she looked at herself in the mirror, her appearance shocked her. She usually didn't care much about how she looked at school, but had she really come to school looking like this? Her hair did crazy twists and turns out of an attempt at a ponytail, and the circles under her eyes gleamed so dark they looked like an athlete who streaked the black stuff under his eyes to shield them from glares of stadium lights. Oh well, all she could do was splash some water on her face, try to smooth down some of her stray curls, and hope Steve didn't wait for her outside. When Sam walked in English, the substitute obviously continued to call roll, obliviously, and Sam simply sat down and said "here" when her name was called. The pain that now intensely pounded in her leg and kept Sam from even wondering why Miss Walker was absent, or if she were ill. The movie the sub was starting to show was the A&E biography of William Shakespeare that Sam had viewed probably every year since the 7th grade. Mrs. Walker's desks were arranged a little better than Mrs. Baker's, so Sam could prop her leg up on Jeremy Stanley's desk and get a little bit of relief. As the movie dragged on and on, Sam began to feel the weight of her eyelids. Could she dare put her head down on her desk for even just a minute? The desk felt cool on her cheek, so that woke her up a little bit, and some of the urge to sleep passed. She didn't pick her head up, though, because from this angle, she now stared at Reagan Standifer. And Reagan Standifer was something nice at which to stare. He had been Sam's boyfriend in the 6th grade. Now that she thought about it, Steve had been the one to bring Sam the note asking if she liked Reagan. She scribbled yes, and Steve ferried it back to Reagan. At lunch, she had her first boyfriend. Sam couldn't remember if they had ever talked outside of school, but the in-school romance lasted for an entire 2 months, forever in middle school time. But it was not meant to be. Reagan broke Sam's heart when he said he didn't like her anymore. Reagan now dated Cynthia Fenton, and from what Sam heard about the two of them, they could become parents before they graduated. Apparently, Cynthia was quite skilled and knowledgeable and flexible. Reagan had dropped most of his extracurricular activities, and Sam never saw one without the other, except maybe in class. Reagan's hand tapped nervously on his desk for the moment, and Sam remembered she had held that hand once during an assembly when no one could see them. Sam smiled at that memory and had a twinge of jealousy towards Cynthia Fenton. As Sam took an inventory of Reagan's best assets, Reagan scrunched down in his desk so his head could rest on the seat back and his beautiful blue eyes closed. His eyelashes were so long. Nature simply practiced no fairness. There was a woman caressing his wavy, thick hair. Wait, why was there a woman caressing his hair? The woman startled Sam, but Sam's gaze held its focus, too fascinated by the beauty of this scene before her to sound any alarm bells. The woman's own hair stood raven black against the backdrop of the sunlight pouring in through the window, and billowed out behind her in massive curls like some supermodel with a fan blowing on her during a photo shoot. Her dress, a sheer gauze of deep crimson red, blew around her, too, fueled by this unseen wind. Sam could see her huge breasts through the soft gauze material. She pressed them against the back of Reagan's head as she bent down over him. Her strangely too red lips kissed his cheeks softly and proceeded down his neck. From his sleep, Reagan reached down and adjusted himself, and the woman threw back her head and laughed. Sam heard nothing, yet she knew the laughter somehow. The woman's face was so beautiful, her skin so perfect, her eyes. The woman now looked directly at Sam. Her eyes, they were the same red as her lips, as her dress. The wind blew the folds of her gown around her, so she appeared to be on fire. Sam became frightened, yet exhilarated, all at the same time, just like she had felt that time when she had held Reagan's hand. Only that one time. Looking at the woman, it was like staring into a fire. Fear, yet no fear. Seeing the flame, receiving only the warmth. Then the woman reached for Sam with her long, slender hands. At the end of each finger, her nails were filed to razor-sharp points, each the same crimson red. She motioned for Sam with one hand, as the other continued to caress Reagan's hair. Sam watched the red fingernails now dig deeply into Reagan's skull. Every time a nail pierced his skull, her fingers sunk deeply into his brain. Reagan smiled and seemed in great pleasure, not pain. Sam reached to take the woman's hand, and the woman smiled, each tooth a razor-sharp fang. Her ghastly grin a crimson so deep it looked as if blood dripped from her fangs like a vampire. Sam sat straight up so abruptly she almost fell out of her desk. Then the bell clanged loudly in her ears. She quickly scanned the room for the woman, but only saw Reagan rising slowly from his chair. He subtly adjusted his pants and put his notebook in front of himself. Stunned, heart pounding, Sam could not move for several seconds. Had she fallen asleep and had another nightmare? No. Her eyes had never closed. She had been fixed on Reagan the entire time, unblinking. This time she knew it was real. Yes, very real. And that Samantha Flynn was insane.